The former MVP, who once dominated headlines for averaging triple-doubles, is now making news for all the wrong reasons. Russell Westbrook, the man who redefined what it meant to be explosive on a basketball court, is facing the most uncertain chapter of his legendary career. At 36 years old, the nine-time All-Star finds himself in uncharted territory, completely unsigned as we head deep into September, with whispers around the league growing louder that his time might be running out. What makes this situation absolutely wild is that Westbrook actually had a guaranteed payday sitting right in front of him. The Denver Nuggets offered him a $3.4 million player option for the 2024-25 season, money that most veterans would grab without hesitation. But Russ? He declined it. He walked away from guaranteed cash, betting on himself in a market that's proven to be colder than anyone expected. Now, months into free agency, that decision is looking more questionable by the day. Teams that were supposedly interested have gone silent, and the phone calls that should be coming simply aren't happening. But here's where things get really messy. Westbrook's final stretch in Denver tells a story that front offices around the league have been studying closely. Remember when he got benched against the Sacramento Kings by interim head coach David Adelman? That wasn't just a one-off decision. It was a statement about where his game had declined to. The same player who once carried entire franchises on his back was being told he couldn't be trusted in crucial moments. His explosiveness, that signature first step that terrorized defenders for over a decade, had clearly lost a step. The numbers don't lie either. While he averaged a respectable stats of 15.3 points, 7.0 rebounds, and 6.1 assists in the 36 games he started for Denver, it was what happened when the lights got brightest that really mattered. And here's the kicker. Teams aren't just worried about his on-court production anymore. League executives have been whispering about fit issues, about chemistry concerns, about whether bringing in Westbrook is worth the potential disruption to established rotations. This is the same player who was once considered untouchable, who demanded max contracts and got them. Now, he's having to convince teams that he can accept a reduced role without causing problems. The irony is brutal. The man who never backed down from any challenge is now facing the biggest one of his career, proving he still belongs. Here's where things get really interesting though. Despite all the concerns, despite the age questions and the declining athleticism, one team has emerged as the clear frontrunner for his services. League sources are pointing to the Sacramento Kings as the most likely destination, and the connection makes perfect sense when you dig into it. The Kings need veteran leadership. They need someone who can handle the ball and create offense off the bench, and they've got the cap space to make it work. But there's a catch that nobody's talking about. Sacramento is also the same team where Westbrook got benched during that infamous stretch with Denver. The optics of him potentially signing with the very franchise that witnessed his lowest moment, that's the kind of storyline that writes itself. But Sacramento isn't the only team in the conversation, and this is where the plot thickens. The New York Knicks have been mentioned as a potential suitor, though their interest seems more lukewarm than genuine. Think about it. The Knicks are trying to build something sustainable around their core, and bringing in a 36-year-old point guard with declining skills doesn't exactly scream long-term planning. Yet the allure of having Russell Westbrook in Madison Square Garden, even a diminished version, still has some appeal for a franchise that's always loved star power. The Milwaukee Bucks have also been floated as a possibility, especially given their need for depth and playmaking off the bench. But here's the reality check. None of these teams are exactly breaking down doors to sign him. The most brutal truth about Westbrook's situation is what it reveals about the modern NBA's relationship with aging superstars. This league moves fast, brutal fast, and yesterday's MVP can become today's afterthought quicker than most people realize. We've seen it happen before, but rarely to someone with Westbrook's resume. 9 All-Star appearances, an MVP award, over 100 career triple-doubles. That's Hall of Fame material by any measure. Yet here he is, struggling to find a team willing to give him even a minimum contract. The game has evolved, and players who can't adapt get left behind regardless of what their trophy case looks like. What's really eating at Westbrook, according to sources close to the situation, is the perception that he's become a liability rather than an asset. For someone who built his entire identity around being unstoppable, around willing his team to victory through pure determination, accepting that he might need to completely reinvent his role is psychological warfare. He's not just fighting for a roster spot, he's fighting for relevance in a league that's increasingly moving away from the style of play that made him famous. The hero ball, the contested shots, the aggressive drives, all of that worked when he was 27. At 36, it's a different conversation entirely. But here's what makes this story even more compelling. Westbrook still has something to offer the right team. His basketball IQ is still elite, his ability to push pace and create easy baskets for teammates hasn't completely disappeared, and his experience in high-pressure situations is invaluable. The problem is finding a team that can use those skills without getting burned by his weaknesses. It's a delicate balance, and so far, no franchise has been confident enough to pull the trigger. The risk-reward calculation just isn't adding up in his favor, and that's a harsh reality for someone who spent most of his career being considered indispensable. The contract situation adds another layer of complexity that most fans don't fully understand. Westbrook isn't just looking for any deal, he's looking for a situation where he can still contribute meaningfully and potentially rebuild his value for one final payday. Taking a minimum contract with a team that plans to bury him on the bench does nothing for his legacy or his bank account. He needs playing time, he needs opportunity, and most importantly, he needs a role that doesn't set him up for failure. That's a tall order for a player whose skill set has become increasingly niche in today's NBA.
And here's where the Sacramento connection becomes even more intriguing. The Kings are a young, energetic team that could actually benefit from having a veteran presence who understands what it takes to compete at the highest level. Their playoff push last season showed they have potential, but they also revealed some gaps in depth and experience that Westbrook could theoretically fill. The question is whether both sides can swallow their pride enough to make it work. For Sacramento, it's about getting value without disrupting their chemistry. For Westbrook, it's about accepting a role that's far smaller than anything he's ever known. The timing of all this couldn't be worse for Westbrook's camp. Training camps are approaching fast, and the longer he stays unsigned, the less leverage he has in negotiations. Teams that might have been interested at the beginning of free agency are now settled into their rosters and rotations. The desperation factor is starting to creep in, and that's never a good position for any player, especially one trying to prove he's still valuable. Every day that passes without a signing is another reminder that the league has moved on from the Russell Westbrook era. What's particularly fascinating about this whole situation is how it reflects the broader changes happening in the NBA. The league has become increasingly analytical, increasingly focused on efficiency and fit over raw talent and reputation. Westbrook represents the old-school approach: play hard, play fast, and figure out the details later. But modern teams want players who fit specific roles, who can execute within structured systems, who understand their limitations and play within them. That's never been Westbrook's strength, and adapting at this stage of his career is proving to be incredibly difficult. The psychological aspect of this free agency nightmare can't be understated either. For someone who's been the center of attention for his entire career, who's been featured on magazine covers and highlight reels, being ignored by 30 NBA franchises has to be devastating. This is a player who once had teams trading their entire future just for the chance to pair him with their stars. Now, he's basically begging for an opportunity to prove he belongs. The fall from grace has been swift and unforgiving, and it's happening in front of the entire basketball world. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. This situation might actually be the best thing that could happen to Westbrook's career long-term. Being humbled, being forced to accept a reduced role, being challenged to prove himself all over again could bring out a side of his game that we haven't seen in years. Some of the most successful late-career reinventions in NBA history have come from players who hit rock bottom and fought their way back up. The question is whether Westbrook has the self-awareness and flexibility to make those adjustments. The reality check is this: Russell Westbrook is probably going to sign somewhere eventually, but it's going to be on terms that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. He's going to have to accept a bench role, accept limited minutes, and accept that his days as a primary option are over. For a player who spent his entire career believing he was unstoppable, that's a bitter pill to swallow. But it might also be the key to extending his career and preserving what's left of his legacy. The most shocking part of this entire saga isn't that Westbrook is struggling to find a team, it's that we're witnessing the end of an era in real time. The last of the truly explosive, inefficient, volume-shooting point guards is being phased out by a league that's become obsessed with spacing and efficiency. When Westbrook finally signs, and he will, it'll mark the definitive end of a style of basketball that dominated the 2010s. And honestly, the way this free agency is played out suggests that the NBA might be perfectly fine with leaving that era in the past.